Hey, welcome back to the Laravel course. This is part 3, and in this part we're going to be focusing on notifications. So if you've ever used Twitter or Facebook or any social network, you'll know that when someone follows you, you get a notification. You might get this by text message, you might get an email, and you'll also see it within the application, within the website. So we're going to be focusing on that last part, but the nice thing about Laravel is it has notifications set up right out of the box, and it allows you to have what we call sort of drivers. These are like integrations. So for example, we can send a notification via SMS using an API. We can send it via email, and we can also out of the box do it via the database, which lets us show it within our web application. So hop over to the Laravel documentation. This episode is going to be more about the Laravel documentation and sort of interpreting it rather than specifically notifications, but notifications is the example, if that makes sense. So Laravel has tons of sort of built-in packages, built-in features. I couldn't possibly explain all of them in videos because they change all the time, and there's just so many. But like notifications is one of them, and it'll be very useful to us in this situation, and also in almost every project you might build. So that's why we're going to be covering notifications, but this sort of concept, this sort of reading the documentation and interpreting it, will apply to pretty much everything, whether you're doing payments or notifications or something else. So head over to the documentation and look for the page notifications. If you just read from the top, you get introduction and creating notifications. So effectively every type of notification, so user followed or user mentioned you, we create a class for it, and that becomes like a type of notification. So we're going to do this first bit here. We're going to create that notification. So in our command line, PHP artisan make notification, and we're going to call it new follower. So this is the notification that's going to get sent to a user when they have a new follower. So we can open up this class. So just search for new follower.php, and that goes into app notifications new follower.php. Then you might have new message or new mention, that kind of thing inside of here. But for now, we're just going to stick with new follower. Now, out of the box is built for emailing. So you'll see public function via is set to mail. We can also add things to here, or we can replace them. So in this case, we're not going to be sending emails for new followers. We're just going to display them within the app. So we're going to be using database, and you'll find all of the different sort of drivers, all the different via options in the Laravel documentation. You can also create your own by extending it. But we're going to be going with database. Next, we're going to remove the toMail function, because we're not going to be emailing these notifications, but you can see how it sort of builds those up as the example. And then we've got toArray. So we're going to call this toDatabase instead, because we're going to be storing it in the database, of course. And here you got return, and that is just some of the data that we're going to be storing. So notifications are stored in JSON, which gets stored in a database table called notifications, and we're going to create that table right now. So head back to the documentation, and in the database notification section, this is what we're going to be using. It gives you two commands, PHP artisan notifications table, which will set up that migration. Remember, we never edit directly to the database, or ideally. We always create a migration, and then we migrate it. So here we'll have a new migration. In the database, migrations, create, there should be a notifications one in here, but it hasn't refreshed on mine. And I just closed Visual Studio Code and reopened it, and you'll see it refresh. I don't know why it didn't refresh automatically, it normally does. But we have this create notifications table migration. This is pretty much what we expect, ID, type, and various other columns, timestamp columns, etc. We don't need to edit this fortunately, because it's all done for us. So the next step is PHP artisan migrate. I need to CD back into our project folder, PHP artisan migrate, and you can see it's migrated that notifications table. So when I launch this in my MySQL editor, or client, or whatever you want to call it, I've got a notifications table. We have ID, type, notifiable type, ID, data, read at, created at, updated at. And these are just the standard out-of-the-box columns for notifications. So remember how a few minutes ago I was saying notifications get stored in JSON. That gets stored in this data column right here. And then the type stores obviously the type of notification. So in this case, new follower, notifiable type, very similar thing, IDs and timestamps. So let's go ahead and create our first notifications. So in this array here, this is basically the data that we would need in order to display that notification. And what I mean by this is, let's say, for example, new follower. We would need to know the person who followed you. So let's get the ID of the person so that we can find other information about them, and then also their name. And the reason we're going to do that rather than store the ID of the person and then the name is just to speed it up, but you could just store the ID. So in this case, user ID, and then this equal to arrow, $this user ID. And that's going to grab the user ID, and we're also going to just store the name in there. Again, you don't need to do this. It might be better to not do this, but for the sake of keeping it simple, I'm just going to store the username in here. So user, arrow, name. Now you might notice, if you're paying attention, this user doesn't exist. It would have to be in this class somewhere, and we don't have a property called this user. So we're going to create that. So I'm going to set up a variable public $user. So that's going to be like a global variable within this class. And in the construct, we're going to pass in a user, and we're going to go $this user is equal to $user. So whatever we pass into this notification, being the user account, we're going to fill it into this public variable. And then we're going to be able to reference that when we set up the notification. I hope this makes sense. Think of it like a settings table. So here you're just setting what you want to store in the notification. So now we're going to actually go ahead and create a notification. And the way I tend to test things, if you just want to write a bit of code and run it without having to actually do it properly, you just want to test it, I just set up a get root and then call it /x, for example, and then give it a function. So this is going to be an anonymous function, inline function, whatever you call it. And here you can go ahead and do whatever. So I'm going to echo something. And in my browser, I can navigate over to /x. I need to PHP artisan serve in order to get my web server running. /x, it takes you to that function right there. So back in the documentation, I'm going to go all the way back to the top, and we've got sending notifications. So in this case, use the notification straight. We can go user, notify, the type of notification, and then the data we're going to pass it. It's really simple, and you need to make sure that you're using that notification class. I'll show you that right now. So in here, let's go ahead and go $user, notify, and we're going to pass in a new, and we called it new follower. And then in here, you've got to pass in the user account of the person you're following. So I'm going to go ahead and go user, : find or fail, and I'm just going to go 2. So user number 2. We're going to be logged in as user number 1, and we're going to give the notification to user number 1, but it's going to say that user 2 has followed them. So that's what the user 2 here is for. And then we need to define who $user is, which is going to be the logged in user, so auth user. So hopefully, if that's all done right, what have I done here? Pass error, $user equals auth user, $user notify, new follower. It looks like I haven't got enough brackets at the end there, and that solves the trick, so just a little syntax error there. So as I was saying, we're going to get the currently logged in user, and then we're going to notify the logged in user that someone else has followed them. Obviously, this is just a test. So I'm going to go ahead and run this X file, and the issue here is that we're not logged in, so call to member function notify on null. If you're not logged in, this here is null, auth user is null. So in this case, we need to log in. So I'm going to go ahead and stick the password in, and here you go. Here's the recent updates. As we did in the previous episode, you can click on a user, but that's not what we're here for. We're going to go to /x, and hopefully that has just notified user number 1. So let's go ahead in our database, refresh, and we've got nothing in here. So let's have a look what's going on. I'm going to go to my new follower class and have a look here. This checks out right here to database, return database, that all looks okay, $this user, that all looks okay. And it actually turns out that my MySQL client was just stuck. There is actually a notification in there, so it all worked fine. You'll see it's created a row with a type app notifications new follower, so that's the class of the notification. Notifiable type being app user, because we're notifying a user class, that's who we assigned it to. Notifiable ID is 1, and then data, this is that JSON I was talking about. This is the stuff that we're actually going to read from. And the reason you store this as JSON rather than columns, rather than having a user ID column and a user name column, is because these could vary based on what you're notifying. So for example, if you're sending a notification of a new direct message, you might want to store the name of the person, the content of the message, an attachment, the time the message was sent. So in a situation where the data would vary a lot, you would tend to use JSON, and Laravel has some really nice ways of manipulating JSON in the database. But we're not going to go too much into this. We'll show you a little bit, but we're not going to go too much into that in this episode. So now that we know the notification is definitely saving, that's part 1 out of the way. Now we just got to retrieve the notifications. So we've just notified user 1. I'm going to comment this out so we don't run it again. And now I'm going to go for each auth:/user, and it's called notifications as $notification. And then we're going to dd, this is display and die or dump and die, something like that. It just basically gives you an array, it shows you the array, and then dies straight afterwards, so it doesn't do any code afterwards. We're going to dump notification. What we've effectively done here is we've got all of the notifications for the logged in user, and we're going to split them down in a for each to get just the first one. So refresh that now, and you'll see it here, attributes, there is the notification right there. So if you've done sort of legacy PHP, well not legacy PHP, but if you've done just plain old boring PHP, vanilla PHP, you might have created your own database to do this, and then set up your own helper functions and all sorts of that. Laravel does it out of the box, and this is really the power of Laravel, is that they've thought of everything. Rather than you rewriting the code that someone else has already done a million times, you just have it out of the box, and this works for almost everyone. And if it doesn't work for you specifically, you can just extend Laravel's code with your own features, your own functions, and you can just work with what they've got. It's brilliant for that. It's brilliant if you're a startup or you just want to get your project off the ground. To me, it means that you can focus on the business logic and think about what your platform's going to actually do, rather than spending time on syntax or just the needless stuff, the stuff that you write over and over again. It's just done out of the box. Authentication, sorted for you. Someone else is taking care of the security. And that really is the power of Laravel. That's why I really like it. So going back to what I originally wanted to say is we've grabbed that notification. So now you can view the notifications, you could display them in a nice list, and then you can say $notification, arrow, and you can go mark as read. I think that's the function name, it's mark as read. What that does is it ticks this column right here. It says read at, it gives a timestamp in there so that you know you've read it. And then we will never show the notification again, or we might show it a different color. You know how Facebook will show it slightly lighter gray if you read the notification, and then they'll show it like blue or something if it's a new notification? That's what this column here is for. So my SQL is tripping out over that. We can mark it as read. So let's refresh the page. Now when I look in the database, it's now read. So now we won't see that as an unread notification. So now if I go user unread notifications, and go dd $notification, and I'm going to run this first, die. So we're going to create the notification first, just run that, and then comment this out. And we're going to look for all unread notifications, only unread notifications, anything that we've read, we don't care about. Refresh. There's our unread notification, and in the database you can see it like this. But then as soon as we notification mark as read, we're going to do that, refresh, then we're going to dd $notification, refresh, there's nothing there because we marked it as read and we're only selecting unread notifications. I hope that made sense. I went through that very quickly. If not, just watch it again, read the documentation, it should make sense. Because we've marked the notification as read, we can't see it anymore. So I think now we can move on from our test code. I'm going to leave it here for reference, but we can now actually start building this into our platform. So if I go over to the main page, so the home, I'm going to stick notifications. I'm going to make a sidebar, I reckon, with the user's notifications. It's not going to be fancy, just to show that it works. So let's go ahead into our blade files. So these are in resources, views, and then home. And in here we've got column MD8. I'm going to add a column called column MD4 and add a card inside here with a card header, notifications, card body, and let's have a look how that looks. Yeah, we're going to have the notifications on the side here. I think that makes the most sense. And it's really simple to output these because we can just go for each auth : user. We're going to go notifications. Yeah, let's go notifications as notifications. This will show all unread and read notifications. And we can go end for each. So to access the actual data for a notification, we're going to be using this data column, the JSON. And Laravel makes it really simple to do. You don't need to JSON decode, it does it for you. So let's go ahead and create a H5 tag, and we're going to say $notification, data, and then this generates an array called data user underscore name. So what it's literally done is it's generated an array here based on the JSON data. You don't have to do it yourself. So username started following you. And then underneath this we're going to go, let's say we're going to put the timestamp, so $notification created at diff for humans. I think I've shown this function before. Diff for humans shows you 5 minutes ago, 30 seconds ago, 2 hours ago. So here you go, John Doe started following you 3 minutes ago. John Doe started following you 8 minutes ago. The reason for that is because we got it twice in here. I want to go ahead and remove the second one because it's kind of unneeded. You could put something nicer in here just to make it look better. Perhaps let's set up the link to the user account. That's quite simple to do. I'm going to say put an A tag in there, close it off just before the closing header, so paste that at the end, and say /u $notification, data, user ID, refresh. John Doe started following you, click it, and you go to John Doe's profile. Awesome. That's our notification set up. The final thing we need to do is actually trigger the notifications when you start following someone. And we need to set up the following system anyway, because we don't have that yet. So go to John Doe's profile, and we're going to add a follow button on his profile. So over here, profile, I'm going to do this as a form. I'm not going to do any fancy Ajax here, because it's not really the point of the episode. Let's see if we can put this in the header. So form action is going to be something, method is going to be post. I'll come up with the action in a minute. And the input is going to be a submit. It's going to have a name of follow and a value of the user's ID. So in this case, we're going to have $user ID. That's going to be the user that we're going to follow. I'm actually going to say name is equal to user. And I'm going to give this a class of btn-primary. And a value of follow. Refresh. So we've got a follow button here, and maybe we can float that to the right. This isn't a front-end tutorial, as I mentioned before. That will do. Doesn't look great, but that will do, because this is just a back-end tutorial. You might notice that we're already following John Doe, and it's saying follow, so we can sort that out as well. So we can do an if statement, and then stick an else on the end of it, else end if. So we're going to say if the user is already following, show this, otherwise show another thing. And to find out if the user is already following, we can go to the user class, user messages, following. So I'm going to set up a new function to check if the logged in user is following a specific user. So we're going to say is following, function is following, $user, yeah, we'll go $user. So this is going to be the user that we're checking if we're following them, if that makes sense. We're going to go return $this following. So this is going to grab everyone that we're following, where I think we called it following ID, yep, where following ID is equal to $user ID. And then we're going to count them. And effectively, this is going to return either 0 or 1. So it's going to say 0 if we're not following them, because there'll be no row, or it will say 1 if we are following them. That should have made sense. So function is following. So if $or auth : user is following, and we're going to pass in the user that we're looking at, the profile page we're on. So if they are following, use this. Otherwise, use this. I'm going to change the text, so unfollow. What we're actually going to say is name is equal to, let's say unfollow. And here we're going to say name is equal to follow. So that way on the back end, we'll be able to tell whether they're trying to unfollow a user or follow them. It'll make it a little bit easier for us. And we'll set that to danger since they're going to unfollow. Refresh, wrong page. So now it's saying unfollow because we're already following them. So it appears that wherever it is, this is following is working. So as I say, this is a query. So we're going to grab a list of everyone we're following and then narrow it down to where the following ID is the user we passed in. Count them. There'll be either 0 or 1. 0 always means false. 1 always means true. All good. It's pretty simple. So there's our if statement sorted out. Now I'm going to go ahead and open up our controller. So the controller is called profile controller. And to save time, I'm going to stick it here. So I'm going to say public function follow user. And this is also going to handle unfollowing. So actually we'll call it follow or unfollow for lack of a better name. And we're going to pass in an object called request. It's this here, the Illuminate support facades request $request. And if you stick this at the beginning of a function, if you stick this as one of the variables that are passed into the function, it effectively gets all the post values, the get values, the user agent, tons of stuff like that. It brings it in this variable. You don't need it in, for example, the first one because we're not passing in any data, or we're passing in user in the URL. But for this one, we're going to be passing something in the get and the post values. So it'll be useful to have access to that. And then of course we need to set this up in the web.php file. So root : get. And then we're going to say /follow. And the function we called it, what do we call it? Follow or unfollow user. So we're going to say profile controller follow or unfollow user. And this is actually going to be a post. So my mistake, we're going to be posting the data, not getting it, because we're actually going to be making changes. So post, and here we go, where is it? Profile controller. So in the request, we're going to have a variable called request arrow follow or request arrow unfollow, because that's the name of the two buttons. So if $request follow and else unfollow. So unfollow and follow. So the $user, the user that we're going to follow is going to be user. So we can grab the user object, find or fail. Remember, this will grab a user row, but it will make sure it can find one. If it can't find one, it will error the page because it's no good to us. $request follow, and this is going to be the user ID. And for unfollow, it's going to be exactly the same, except it's going to be unfollow. So in the case of both of these, it's quite simple. For follow, we're going to say auth : user following, and then we're going to say attach and $user ID. So let me just re-explain this. So auth user is the logged in user, of course. Then we get the list of people they're following, and we're going to attach the user ID that we just passed in. Attaching just means create a new row and link that other user to me. So we've got that relationship between the user and the users they're following. So in this case, we can attach a followed user to this user's following, if that makes sense. I hope so. It's kind of in the words here, it's pretty English. So a list of following, we're going to attach a user. And then you guessed it, for unfollow, it's just detach. Hopefully you can spell that right, attach. So hopefully now that should work, and we're just going to return success. Actually, in this case, we're not going to return success because we're not doing this via Ajax. So if you were doing this via Ajax, you might return some JSON, or you might just return the word success. Really, it's just that 200 status code. If you're not familiar, 200 means success, and then a 400 number would mean there was an error. So you can return those status codes to the browser, and then Ajax can take that status code and understand what to do with it. But in this case, we're going to redirect the user. So return redirect, and we're going to redirect back to the user that we're looking at, their page. So /u, and then concatenate $user ID. So now hopefully, fingers crossed, this should work. I need to set up the actual root, so /follow that should be. I need to set this up inside of the profile blade. In here, in the action method, it's going to be post, and then name, unfollow, and follow. Let's give this a go. There's a chance it's my error. It's erroring already. Request because the name is already in use. In this case, this means that you're using a package or using a class twice. It happens quite often, usually accidentally, and that is in the profile controller. And the reason for it is because request is already included in every single class or every single controller. When I went and re-imported it, I imported a different request. I think it was a Symfony, a package or something like that. It doesn't really matter, but you must only ever have one package with a name. It's quite a common error, that's why I'm leaving it in the video rather than cutting it out. Okay, back to what we were originally doing. If I hit unfollow now, this page has expired due to inactivity. So Laravel has something called CSRF tokens built in. Now, a CSRF token, it protects against cross-site scripting. And what this means is, let's say you are logged into your bank. You are logged into Bank of Scotland, your online banking. Great, you've got it logged in, you're in a different tab. And then you go onto some malicious website. Now this malicious website is going to do a post request to your bank. It's going to go to Royal Bank of Scotland, and it's going to hit the endpoint that says transfer £1,000 to this bank account. So there'll be a URL that Royal Bank of Scotland or any bank has that hits their server, and when you hit it, it does a bank transfer. So any site could have a form. You think it's just a email sign-up form or something, but you hit the form, and then all of a sudden all your money's gone. And that's kind of how it works. That is a cross-site scripting attack, and this is what CSRF protection would hopefully protect against. So the way this works is on the bank side, in any form on the bank side, any trusted form on the Royal Bank of Scotland's website, they would have a token that only your browser knows and they know. Which means that when you go on some dodgy website, they would need to submit that token to prove that they were a legitimate source of the post request. Now, any dodgy website won't know the token because the token is unique to you. It's usually the token will expire, so there's no way of the malicious site knowing what the token is. And Laravel has something like this built in. If you didn't understand that analogy there, read up on CSRF tokens and cross-site scripting and all those kind of vulnerabilities, because just as a general skill, it's quite important to know. But it's not super important for this tutorial. I just want you to understand why that error came up and why it's a good thing. The way we can solve this is by, in the form, having CSRF Field, I think it's called, CSRF Field as a function. And what this will do is it will generate the HTML with the tokens. Let's have a look at how that looks. So refresh that page and view the page source. And in here, let's look for the form. You'll see it's created an input with a name of _token with this long token in it. And as I say, no other website would know this token, and Laravel is only ever going to accept a post request with this token. And if I refresh the page, the token might change. Nope, it just changes every so often, so that other sites won't be able to know the token. So now, when I refresh this, and I go ahead and unfollow, sorry, the page you're looking for cannot be found, /follow, why is that? We are posting to an action, it's /follow, method is post, and we are posting that value, web.php, /follow, follow or unfollow user. The way I would debug this is I go into the profile controller, I would stick a die at the beginning of the function. Okay, so because it went blank, we know it's definitely getting to here. Now this shouts out to me that this user find or fail is failing because it can't find the user. So we can debug that by going dd $request, and we can look at everything that's getting submitted. So let's have a look here. In here we've got not attributes, it is request parameters unfollow, and for some reason we're setting unfollow equal to unfollow. Now I can tell you why that is. In profile.blade, I've actually set the value twice because I set the value and the value. Now this is a mistake on my end, this is actually a genuine mistake, because I kind of tried to employ some dodgy coding here just to get it to work without doing some front-end stuff. I set the value being the text that should show on the browser for the button, but then I accidentally set the value again with the user ID. So what we can do this the proper way. No more time saving. Input type equals hidden. Name is equal to user. And then value is equal to $user ID. So that's going to pass in a hidden input, which is going to just pass in some extra post data with the user ID. And on the profile controller side, we're going to go if request follow. This is still correct. So if it's a follow or if it's an unfollow. But now we're going to go request user. Let's go ahead and hit that again. Let's remove the DD this time because we don't need it. Refresh. Sorry, the page you're looking for cannot be found. Oh dear. That's still an issue. Let's go ahead and DD it again to see what is good. Never mind, let's have a look at what we're posting. So let's go ahead and DD $request. This video has turned into debugging lesson, which I think is actually quite good. I've always said it's very useful as a viewer to know how to debug something rather than just, this is how to do it, here you go, it's working. I think this is really important. So unfollow, unfollow, user number 2. Okay, so that suggests to me, so user number 2 is there, user, and we forgot to update the unfollow sort of route, the unfollow condition to grab the right user. So we were grabbing unfollow, which as we said doesn't work. We need to grab request user. Hopefully that made sense, and we're going to remove the DD, comment it out, refresh it. Here, class app HTTP controllers auth not found. Very common one, you just need to import auth, Illuminate supports facades auth. Refresh that now. Method collection detach does not exist. Did I spell that wrong? And in this situation, here is another good lesson yet again. When I go following, I'm actually just grabbing the data. I can't do anything with it. It doesn't have any methods assigned to it. But if you grab following as a method, it will have all of the helper functions that go along with it, the detach, the attach, all the formatting stuff. But not having this just grabs the data only. It's something that's weird to get your head around when you first start dealing with Laravel. I know I struggled with it. And as you can see there, it's a very easy mistake to make. But if I go ahead and refresh now, that function now exists. And you can see it followed, unfollowed. So now I can press this and it's following me and unfollowing me. Okay, so our unfollowing and following system works. If I unfollow now and go back to my home page, I no longer see Mr. John Doe in there. The notification is still there, but that's because we're not clearing out notifications. But if I go back to John Doe's account, u/2, let's follow him, go back to home, and now you'll see John Doe's really cool tweets in my timeline, his messages in my timeline. One thing we didn't do is we haven't set up the notifications yet. That's the whole point of the video. So let's do that now. So in this function here, when we send the follow or the unfollow request, we need to notify the user. And we're only going to notify them of followers. We're not going to notify them unfollowers because people might get a little bit upset about that. So let's do that now. So remember back in my test, I had this code here to notify a user of whatever you want. We're going to just paste that in here. Actually, I'm going to paste it in the follow section only because we're not going to do it for unfollow, as I said. We're going to say user, and in this case it's going to be $user notify. It's going to be the user that we're following, not the user that's logged in. That would be pointless. We're going to notify the followed user that they have a new follower, and the follower is auth : user, and we need some extra brackets in there. So I'm going to repeat myself through this just to get it over and done with. So user being the other user, the one we're going to follow, John in this case, we're going to notify him that he's got a new follower, and the new follower is the person that's currently logged in. In this case, it's me. And that should do the trick. So now let's go ahead and unfollow him, and then follow him. New follower not found, we need to import it. Same old issue again, new follower. Simple as that. Refresh. So now it should have notified him. So now let's log in as user number 2, and I can't remember what his login is. So let's go ahead and check the users table. It's test2@test.com. He's got the same password. So test2@test.com, password. So you can see here, he's now got a notification, and this guy is going to go ahead and follow Neil because he's a nice guy. And there we go. Let's log in back as test@test.com. That's my main user, the one that's in my name, Neil. John Doe started following you 10 seconds ago. I'm not going to worry about clearing unread notifications and stuff. That is a whole other thing. You can try that on your own actually. Maybe I can set that as like a little homework almost. Because I showed you how to do it sort of, and maybe you can implement that in your own project on your own. So when they view a notification, have a mark as read button or something like that. Maybe put a bell icon and have them hide and whatever. I'm going to leave this episode here because it's dragged on quite long. That is notifications for you, and also very basic debugging in Laravel, how I debug using those dies, using DD. Dying at certain places in the function to see where the error is being caused is so helpful, and a lot of people don't do it for some reason. They think it's too not advanced enough. It's not taking use of all the debugging features that Laravel has. So as I said, I'm going to leave this video here. There's going to be 1 or 2 more videos left of this course, and then I think we're going to wrap it up. So thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.
I hope you have enjoyed listening to this video. Please be kind enough to like it, and you can comment any of your doubts and queries, and we will reply them at the earliest. Do look out for more videos in our playlist and subscribe to Edureka channel to learn more. Happy learning!